So, first of all, I would like to say thank you for everybody who came here. We really appreciate this, and actually our topic is like who is dancing. This is about the audience and about the community, so it's actually also about you, and for sure you will have an opportunity to ask your questions and to participate in this discussion, but probably in the end. Also, I would like to say many thanks to our partners, Metaculture, who are hosting us here. So thanks a lot, guys. For sure, I want to say thanks to our participants of the discussion. Yeah, I will shortly present everybody. Drago. Drago is an artist and a curator, also a writer and a radio producer, working in the field of queer, feminist and gender theories. Also, Lou is co-founder, member of artistic platform Xena and Entities. Network Berlin, and the producer of Trans Science, a monthly show on Cashmere Radio Berlin. And they also work with the Berlin-based queer feminist party Laken. Recently they've had an opportunity to combine also their musical and theoretical work, speaking about the context of queer feminist activism and all the topics related to LGBT theory and activism. Also, we have Lukas from Kashmere Radio. Lukas is an artist and electronic musician and a DJ. He's a co-founder of Kashmere Radio Berlin, Lichtenberg, and he also is teaching sound studies and sonic arts in the Berlin University of Arts. Baklanova, right now Maya is working on Sхеmа as a PR manager, and also she's a co-founder of a magazine Tide. Yustyna Kravchuk is a member of Visual Culture Research Center. She's also like a journalist, a translator, and a researcher. And also Yustyna has co-organized some music events like Oracle, also within the international biennial program of Visual Culture Research Center. Here we also have Hanna Vasyk, who is working on the new project, which actually we cannot disclose information about it, but yet Hanna also have worked for Sхеmа for a few years as a promoter. And also, my name is Nazarii Sovsun. I represent here also the Visual Culture Research Center, but also before I'm already the third person here who worked at Sхеmа. And now I would like to ask this question, which is the main line and which is in the name of our discussion, who is dancing, to each of you, just, I don't know, for the introduction. And maybe I will ask Yustyna Kravchuk to give us some broader context. And yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks. Thank you for the introduction. Well, to talk about Kyiv context, I think I have to start with the fact that, in my opinion, I think that every consideration or conceptualization of local Kyiv rave scene has to start with talking about this post-revolutionary experience of 2015-16. And I think there is like a couple of reasons for this. First of all, there is simply historical circumstances, because exactly after these revolutionary events on Maidan, local party scene and local raves grew quite rapidly. they became more popular. They started being attended by considerably bigger amount of people, and they literally grew in scale. And secondly, it's also because exactly after Maidan, these events started receiving their certain representation in international media, and so also Kyiv scene sort of appeared on the map, and people outside Ukraine actually started talking about it and thinking about it in general. But an interesting, important moment is that, of course, this sudden international attention to these events was, first of all, connected with political situation in the country, because in general, during Maidan and afterwards, there was like a huge amount of international media here. There was a big international interest to Ukrainian political context, and of course they couldn't miss also this cultural scene of Ukraine, and so they, when these stories in the media emerged, they were very largely covering it in the context of these major political changes and upheavals. And what's quite interesting is that in the beginning, when the first reports appeared, many members of the electronic music community here, which are both musicians, DJs, and promoters, and just simply ravers and partygoers, they were kind of resisting these kinds of narratives and opposing to them. Saying that that first of all, being engaged in music earlier, before Maidan, they felt like this kind of coverage, it somehow maybe somehow neutralizes their pre-revolutionary experience with this, with electronic music, with this culture in general, and that it also somehow reduces it only to this Maidan, to this political like dimension, and like something is missed. And for a long time, I somehow couldn't understand this, their resistance, because for me it's a rather like natural thing to like see and to consider any artistic form in the political context. I don't believe in any cultural or artistic form outside politics, and so for me it was quite logical that, of course, if media are talking about our culture, they cannot not talk about politics. So, but then when I started thinking about it further, I realized that maybe this kind of resistance to this political aspects of this culture was not so much because of like general resistance to politics, but maybe because of these particular representations which it received. because as far as I remember, the very first stories in the media about local scene were in this Vice, this ID magazine. There was a short film about Sхеmа, and there were also stories in this online Calvert magazine or a Calvert journal. And these, in my opinion, these are kind of shitty, media with particular, I don't know, frameworks, because they literally impose their own narratives about different scenes by simply commodifying it and subjecting it to this certain colonial gaze. And there was in recent years also a lot of criticisms about this concept of New East, which was invented actually by this Calvert journal as as something that is opposing to this Western electronic music culture, and that this is that these scenes in Eastern Europe and on post-Soviet space, that unlike commodified and long-time commercialized Western electronic music, they still have something authentic in them. They carry some real some spirit, and this is a bit like a rather post-colonial rhetoric in a certain way. And from some point of view, I kind of understand this resistance to this kind of narratives. But I also think that, on the other hand, our response to these kinds of representations shouldn't be should not be the certain disengagement with politics, but what we have to do is, to the contrary, somehow try to create our own political discourses about basically our own cultural experiences. And so it's not someone else who has to talk about our music scene, it's we who are supposed to build it and to somehow conceptualize it. So that is probably one of the reasons why we gathered here, I hope. And I also have to say that this is a very challenging thing in today's political context, because in the last 5 years the situation became much more reactionary, both because our politics becomes more and more defined by war and violence, and there's a huge conservative turn in politics, and it's not just here but also worldwide in a global perspective. And I think that these kinds of political and cultural narratives and vocabularies that we have to invent, it's important that they will be progressive and that they will be opposing to this kind of consensus that is now in politics worldwide.
Thank you, Yustyna. I find it naturally if I give a word to Maya, because Maya represents actually Ukrainian new media, but also she presents Sхеmа right now. And though you might talk about this, representation from within the community on the one hand, on the other hand, you might speak also about the Well, if, as Yustyna says, the promoters and so on are avoiding topics like politicizing this subjectivity or collectivity, what do you think? Is it reasonable to speak about ravers and party goers in political terms and so on? Thank you.
Thank you, Nazarii. Yeah, I agree with Yustyna. It's very important to talk loud about political issues. But as Yustyna said, our community feel themselves very opposite to all these articles in Calvary Journal, in Vice, and so on, so on. And I think in our community, when you're trying to promote your political agenda very straight, it's very in a very straight way. Our community unconsciously reject these things, this information. And sometimes it might be better to communicate, more effective to communicate your political agenda into your activity. For example, with Tide, we don't have an article like revolution in Ukraine or revolution in Georgia or something, but we try to put our political agenda into articles with artists and through the stories of the artists to communicate our political agenda. For example, one of our latest article about Bendy Giske. He is a performer, a saxophonist from, he's live in Berlin now, and he is queer, and he talk very open about his queerness, about his coming out, and a lot of things about political agenda, and we put it in our magazine and trying to communicate with our audience in this way, not like this straight way, but through the stories.
Thanks. Maybe Hanna, Vasyk can be the next, probably, just to speak about also, as you are a promoter, you know a lot about the audience, about the community which is coming to raves. So who are these people who are dancing actually?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just worrying that probably this microphone reacts to yours. So
let's try this one.
Hey guys, thank you Nazarii for the question. So actually my idea was to come here and to argue every sentence what was mentioned in the description of the public event, despite of the list of the names of the participants. And I partially spoiled like the thing that I want to talk about, and I will just try to briefly explain why I think that the question who is dancing is not relevant, but for me it's rather a question why we are dancing. So now, if you allow me, just a little bit of boring history. So let me recollect the ideas of one guy, Jean Baudrillard, and he actually dismissed the discotheque at all as the lowest form of contemporary entertainment. And Sarah Thornton, in her book, published pretty recently, Club Cultures, she told that dance cultures have been seen to epitomize mass culture in its worst. So dance music used to be standardized, mindless, and banal, while dancers have been regarded as narcotized, conformist, and easily manipulated. I don't know if you would agree with it, but I think that nowadays the situation is changed a little bit, and as we can see, the like night culture and raves in general, they became subjects of a highbrow subjects like in these conferences at the music festivals, at the public events, as like our one, for example. And also it's a theme for curators to think about, and it is exhibited in like different galleries, art centers, and like probably is attempt to use its fresh breath of energy and to bring it somehow to sterile spaces of white cubes. But yeah, let me continue. So in this like change situation, the one more idea that I would like to mention, it's the idea of Theodor Adorno. I'm sure you know him. It's a theorist of mass culture. He was writing about like music in general, and like somehow that we can mention in our situation, about rhythmic obedience, that the music immediately expressed desire of people to obey, that when we are on the dance floor, we just obey to the rhythms, to the music, and we don't have like our own ideas, our own personality and stuff, so we just obey and follow like the line, the direction which music gives us. And like therefore, the dancers in this situation are coordinated battalions of mechanical collectivity. And like to me, I think that like if to take a look on these ideas nowadays, in our age of like hyperbolized individuality, when everyone tries to show itself or like himself or herself, like in social media, also in our like era of augmented reality, like this like me generation and stuff, like what can be better than rejection of the individuality even for some time? And I think that like in these circumstances, like to be no one even for a couple of hours, or like 24 hours, how the party lasts, is a statement. And like to leave behind the social constructs, political definitions, and reveal who you are, like as a human being. So again, coming back to like the hypothesis that I've mentioned at the beginning, so who, like why we are here, everyone in the dance floor, sweaty, dirty, relaxed, and open to other human beings. Why we are here. Then, like the description of the event, we were asked to articulate the political dimensions of the night culture, and like I think that I will be demonized after these words, because like I think that for everyone who is here, rave and night culture is something very, very political, but I have the master degree in political science and like read a lot of these books, also like I have a degree in like Doctor of Philosophy, so like I know, I think, I hope I know what I'm talking about. And like I think that for the moment, of course, like rave is always a socio-political phenomenon, and of course cultural, because like everything that exists within the community of people is political. But I think that for the moment it is a time to change the narration a little bit and like to stop analyze it as only political and to try to define it as like in more like only political related terms. And like from inside, I think that raves have nothing to do with politics for the moment. Of course, like also we understand that electronic dance music culture in general has become like dramatically politicized by the regulations ranged against it, like for the, like as well you mentioned it I think in the description of the event, like all the like the Great Britain and like what we see in Russia now as well. So it's not like something that have happened in the last century, but it's still going on around us. But let me use I think that it doesn't have anything political in its nature, and it doesn't have to declare any political statements itself either. One one more guy, Graham John, it's book Technomad, Global Raving Countercultures. He has written that social dance and pleasures it gives failed to conform to accepted understandings of political. Ravers were caught in a fantasy of liberation, an imaginary form of resistance that was now hyperreal, the rave as implosion of meaning, an ecstatic simulacre. I think that here, like we should like proceeding from this idea that it's implosion of meaning. So it's like really we try to analyze it with our terms and theories that we used to use, and we are good in it. But I think that we shall describe less, experience more, think tomorrow, and feel now. Like if to come back. To the question, like, yeah, why we are dancing, and if to analyze who is dancing, like right now. And probably, like, I'm terribly sorry, one more, I think, last quote of Herbert Marcuse, because Nazarii told that let it be Marcuse, he allowed me to do this. In his essay of liberation, he identified, like, the subject that we are talking about as a mixture of the barricade and the dance floor, the mix of love, play, and heroism, and in the laughter of the youth as a liberating aesthetics. So, I think that the night culture has to stay politically neutral, and like there is no room for politics, and it's the only way for it to be a territory of freedom and the celebration of liberation. Because like night culture itself, I think it overcomes any system of values, even if it declares like the same values that sound like political movements and stuff, like freedom, like, yeah, we can count it like for like endlessly. And maybe you would say that this limitation, the nightlife, to like, it's a bit utilitarian, and like, yeah, that it is limitation only to its utilitarian and ecstatic dimension, but I don't mind it as long as everyone is equal on the dance floor and they feel the dance floor as the safe space. I have like something else, but this I will skip and come to a conclusion that I see that Nazarii is writing, so I think, yeah, a lot of questions and hate will come soon. It's fine, I'm ready. So again, to me, as actually, yeah, like you asked about my personal opinion, dance as an act of freedom that is performance of freedom from a range of dissatisfactions, critical matters, and concerns in the world. And also, I think what is important that in like regarding the like raves or night culture in general, individuals may ultimately operate according to the logics of multiple models simultaneously. So even someone believes in something, like for the moment it can be not so important, and different alternative realities or ideologies could exist at one point. So I don't say that we don't have to analyze night culture as a phenomenon or even as a political phenomenon. And I mean that the whole narration now has to be changed, as it's like really like new times, new ideas, and I think that like for us probably it's too, like, it would be banal to say old school, but still maybe we have to be a little bit forward, like straightforward in our thinking, and not to limit ourselves to like the intellectual leaders of the past, and like try to divide the whole world like only to like white and black, left and right, in terms of politics as well, because it was mentioned as well in the description. So, on the contrary, let it be just celebration of Dionysian mode, hedonism, and ecstatic overcoming of the borders of human everyday existence in action, when the brain shouldn't be overloaded with these questions like who is dancing nearby? Is this guy left or right? That's why, yeah, for me, it's not a question who is dancing, because on the dance floor it doesn't have to matter which political views do you share and what community you belong to. Moreover, to forget who you are in so-called real life, who you will be tomorrow when you will go like to your office or something, and to leave behind all the limits and restrictions that your social role gives you, to allow yourself to do something that you are not allowed or not able to do in the like real life, regular life, and to experience those things which you can't experience anywhere else. So it's kind of several variants how to answer why, but I think that it's a subject for another discussion.
Thank you, Hanna. Although I find this rhetoric a bit escapist and I'm a bit, I would argue on this, but first I would give the word to Lukas, and maybe he would also tell us about the community more, because Lukas represents the radio, which is not a dance floor, but more like a media. But still, you're building a community, and this is interesting. Which kind of community you're working with, you're making, and how? So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, so I will twist the question in like who's making radio at Cashmere Radio instead of who's dancing, and this is a, I would say, diverse community of, I think now it's 110 members of our association. Making radio, it's musicians, it's artists from all over the world, mostly based in Berlin. And what we're trying to do with this community is maybe in relation to what Yustyna said, is building our own discourse and not taking for granted what other media is trying to put forward as a narrative. So I would say Kashmir Radio doesn't have a narrative of what we are, or we rather try to give the voice to individual members who do radio on our channel, and being a platform for that. And besides doing radio, there's most of the members are more or less involved in the cultural scene, being as DJs or musicians, artists, I mentioned that. Some are doing it as a hobby and have another day job. And so this radio is working across scenes. So it's not like one scene we are representing or something, but more like through the means of a radio, building a meta community, bridging between different scenes of different music styles and non-music and activism. We also have a garden project, so I think, it's that aspect of community. Also pointing inwards a lot of times, because doing this kind of endeavor in Berlin, we think requires some cautions and precautions towards what's required of you from outside media. And Berlin is such a vibrant place, maybe, to put it in positive words, that to build up a community requires a little bit of distance sometimes from what's happening, to really focus on people you work with, give them the time, and allow them to develop themselves as an artist. So mostly we host regular shows which happen every month over, I think, 4 years now almost. Of course there's guests, but this is not the main reason of running this radio, is to show what's going through the city, but more concentrating of a growing community.
And Lou, you probably definitely know who are dancing on your dance floors, as you also work on this like a doorman. And so please tell us your answer to this question.
Well, first off, thank you for having me, and I wish I'd brought a pen and paper because I have so much that I would like to reply to every one of the speakers so far, and I'm surely not going to manage. I will. What's that?
Yeah, you will have an opportunity also. Yeah.
I would like to quickly reply to something that Hanna put down before I talk about my specific community, but it will nicely lead into that, I hope. I agree that raving is not inherently political necessarily, but I think it very often can be, and I would personally argue that it should be. I think like the situation that we're experiencing in Berlin and most of Europe with the far-right uprising, I think now is the time to become a bit more political. I mean, I have no idea about how you feel in Kyiv about becoming more political, but I feel like at least my experience in Berlin, I've been living there the last 5 years, has been that people have become increasingly apolitical. And for me, I've been raving for a while, and I feel like this kind of lack of passion can come out when there is this lack of joining together through people, through a shared political aim. I mean, also maybe it's interesting to question what we mean by political. I for sure don't have any master's degree in political science or anything, but I would consider myself a political person because I care about people and I really care about community, and as impossible as it is trying to imagine a better world for ourselves. So I would still say that it would be great if we could somehow make parties more political. Of course, not everything. I mean, also the idea of neutrality, I think, is a very complicated one, because already when we're talking about situations of safety and who is raving, if we're talking about women on the dance floor, or trans and non-binary people being on the dance floor, or queer people being on the dance floor, that already requires a certain level of empathy or care from other people. And I think if you have people with a really extreme right point of view, I think it would be really hard to kind of make this dance floor somehow neutral, because there's of course going to be hate thrown around, also in terms of racial topics, which is a huge one in Berlin also at the moment. So in answer to the question about who is dancing, I can only, of course, speak from my own experience. In Berlin, I would say almost everyone is dancing who's legally able to. But in my specific community, we are organizing a queer and feminist party. We're also restricted by a capacity of the venue, so we do have to be selective about who is coming in, but also in part it is to protect this kind of community and to give a certain level of safety. We absolutely don't believe that there is such a thing as a safe space, because even amongst close friends and people who agree with you politically, you can still be hurt in some way. And I think also setting up ideas of safe space then puts people into this false pretense that they're going to be safe, and then if something does happen, it's probably going to be even worse. So I wouldn't say we have a safe space, but we definitely try and make a safer space for queer and specifically women and non-binary people. And this has been kind of, I would say, born out of a situation in Berlin, which has always been very gay male-dominated since many, many years, as I'm sure you probably all know. And yeah, women and other gender identities have been much less at the forefront. And so with a group of friends, we basically decided that something needed to change about that. And there are also people who are very politically active and reading a lot of feminist and gender theory and things like this. So for sure, the party that we create is is positioned as a political one, and we try and put a certain amount of I don't know, information out there, of course, in a very subtle way. We don't want to be lecturing to anybody, but trying to make the most inclusive environment as possible within the restrictions that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Let's start the conversation. Maybe Hanna, Hanna wants to reply.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very big honor for me that you started your speech from comments to mine one. Actually, regarding that you've mentioned about like Berlin and Ukraine, that you don't know what's happening here in Ukraine. Like during my life, I'm 33 now. I already experienced like 3 revolutions, and like I think that like our community is still, if it is a bit of course as well absenteeistic, and like no one like will go. Who will go tomorrow to the elections? Sunday. Yeah. Okay. So you see, on one hand, like no one do really care about like politics and whom they will elect. On the other hand, like everyone shares the memes about like our current president and somehow follow the political situation, and they think that they are good in it. But like to me, I think that if to analyze the priorities that are important for now, like for example, if you would go to the parties and to the raves in Kyiv, even like people don't kiss there, people don't have sex there, people don't even like they do drugs, of course, but you can not see it like just in an open space. So I think that there, like something. I have the reasons to say it. I'm doing parties like really for like I've done 7 Schemas, and now we have started like one new project, and we are like really in this place everything is allowed, but no one is doing nothing. We built like some kind, we call it drug snails and dark rooms, but they are empty and people just sitting there and chatting. So yeah, I think that we have a little bit other priorities, I would say, for the moment. And me as a promoter, I would like to promote some other things, but I like definitely agree with what you've mentioned about like right-wing guys, for example, whom you will not let into your party. But I think that of course they are dangerous because of their political views. But I think, like to me, it's more about creation a safe space, and proceeding from this perspective, you would not let in homeless people who smell bad or who can like somehow offend other people. You will not let in like some killers or people with knives because like they can offend other people. So for me, it's just about creating the safe space, and like right-wing guys with their like let me be not diplomatic, weird or like dangerous views. Because they're just will probably make a harm to other people. But to my point of view, they are similar. Of course, like now I'm a bit hyperbolizing my words, but like to me, they are similar as the homeless people, because like you just don't want to have them at the party because they will create like. They will be the reason for the not safe atmosphere. So, and also, for example, like the same with no photo policy, which we are trying now to implement in our space. Of course, like somehow you can, not somehow, you can analyze it as a political, like why you don't allow to make people to make pictures. And of course it's a rules, and of course it's done on a certain purpose. But to me, and what I've tried to say during like my previous, like, I don't know, whatever, 5 minutes. So, of course, everything that we are talking about can be analyzed from a political point of view, but I would not limit it to it, and I would like to try to find a little bit different paradigm to talk about it, because I think that it's much wider than like these dimensions. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, also, I think a party in itself basically reproduces itself, and I wouldn't consider it as a political act, but on the other hand, a party itself doesn't need to be disconnected from political consciousness and stuff like that. And also the reason for doing a party can be political. You can make a party in protest of or in response to. But yeah, I mean, the party itself, I would say, is a hedonistic act for people to enjoy themselves, and I wouldn't consider it to be a political act. So I would support you in that, but I don't see it. I don't see it disconnected from politics. So.
Shortly. I just wanted to maybe just shortly also elaborate on why this who question is important for me personally, because I think these questions of constituting of certain political subjectivity and defining like who you are also important because they can help us like to build some narratives not just about the present moment but also about the future in a certain sense, because what Hanna said, I also partly agree that the party itself, the rave, in the moment when it's happening, yes, of course, it's a super hedonistic act, and at this moment you can totally be no one, as Hanna said, to be no one is a statement, but this is kind of thinking is like like living a moment, but it's important to also think what's next. What's next when you, for example, leave the party? You don't live only on the dance floor, you live in the society. And I think within the electronic music community, it's also very important to build certain narratives about the future as well. Especially, considering the fact that even in its origins, techno music, it was also very connected with this futuristic utopian narratives, especially if we talk about Detroit techno, and I think that this kind of utopian thinking is very lacking in contemporary culture and politics, because right now we are in a very dark times, and that's why it's important to talk about whether we are progressing to some better future or is it just an apocalypse and far right, and also one more. Yeah, and also about I wanted to comment about this rise of far-right groups, because also Hanna said that this neutrality on the dance floor, that only neutrality can be, political neutrality can be a manifestation of real freedom. But for me, surely, the freedom itself is also a very political concept. And so I don't think that you can really be free if there is like a complete lawlessness on the streets, if people are like literally being physically attacked and assaulted by paramilitary groups, as it's happening here right now. And from my perspective, I of course have to say that I have been multiple times, I myself have been a witness and a victim of far-right attacks, and So when, for example, I come to Sхеmа and at some point I see some random guy with a naked torso who has like two big like swastikas tattooed on his body, I kind of it kind of bugs me, you know.
You don't feel safe anymore.
Even if he is completely peaceful and he doesn't attack anyone, I kind of feel concerned about my safety. So.
Yeah, me also. I think that not only like in a music dimension, the dance floor became a space of a freedom or inclusiveness, but only like also the space itself, like the nightclub or the rave, proposed the space where people are communicating to each other with the pretty different way that it was before, for example, 90s. Like people are not just making, I don't know, searching for a sex partner and so on, you know, or just they are not touching you. They actually much more respect your body and your space, your own space during the party than anywhere else actually when you go out of the party. And also on the parties which you girls organize, you do have a political statements, and this is probably we have to somehow define what is political in those actions, because, for example, when you give statements that there is no sexism, no homophobia, and no racism on your dance floor, you already make a statement that some people, well, it means that you are inclusive, but you are exclusive for some people who makes this party unsafe. And also, but just because this statement like belongs to only your territory, there is probably maybe there are now some actions of solidarity going out of this your space. For example, we had already witnessed attacks on the ravers on Podil district, and we witnessed an attack on Strichka festival, and the reactions of the promoters were very weak and not actually a solidarity. And well, my question is also, why do you think there is no solidarity between the promoters? Why don't you support each other when there are some attacks and so on? Maybe Maya and Hanna?
Yeah, I'm ready as always, but maybe you want. Yeah.
You too.
I would love to start from the end. Sorry, and I will just clarify the question about solidarity between the promoters. Like you mean this? Yeah, we somehow you think had to react.
Yeah, for example, there was an attack on the hotel during the Strichka festival. So the reaction was for, I don't know, organizers of Strichka, that it's not our problem, it's the problem of a club. The club says it's a problem of a party going on there, and then there is no one else who would support you actually, you know. So yeah.
I think that probably, yeah, that I don't know if I can see anyone from Closer or from Hotel. Artem or someone here, because I think that it's rather a question to them, because when we knew about this situation, actually Sхеmа was happening, I think, like 2 weeks afterwards, something like that. Yeah. Even less, yeah. So we just contacted everyone we could, like some representatives of like right-wing guys whom we know and the guys who knows them, just to know the real reasons of it and to be prepared. And we really like we like took some measures like to be ready to it. So I think that I'm not sure if this question should be addressed to me, because I think that if, like, in this situation, like that could, like, would happen with me as a promoter, like, I would act pretty actively, because, like, and even now, like, with a new project, and and as well, so even, like, our first party, like, this secret party, it was on 25th of May, and we reinforced our security guys. We were, like, really ready. We had a clear instruction and procedure how to react if we see, like, some guys walking on the street and stuff. So I think that, yeah, we, like, have to have it in mind. But still, I mean that even in this situation, if you have the, I don't know, it's a bit weird. If you have the contact or connect, like, to the community and somehow show that you do care and you not, like, don't give a fuck about it, so somehow it never happened, like, to any of my parties. So I think that it's actually, as well, like, on a personal level, probably somehow can be explained. I don't know, but, like, coming back to the first part of your question about. Like, yeah, what is political, and, like, with our like, rules at our party that no sexism, no homophobia and stuff. I've told, in the very beginning that probably there is nothing in our world that cannot be analyzed or explained as political. If we use the word politics and, like, political as everything which is happening within the community, so it's like, somehow can be equalized to, like, the social dimension. So everything which involves relationship between people, the matter of power, the matter of authority or any hierarchy, because, like, in every structure and every organization there is an hierarchy. Like, I don't know what about VCRC, maybe you are not, maybe you're, like, a horizontal structure. Yeah, but I mean that in this case, of course, everything is political. But I mean that we don't have, like, really to diminish everything and limit everything only to it, because, like, no homophobia, it's not connected only, like, to your political views. Because your attitude to gender or to sex, of course, like, it's, like, political on one hand, as I've just mentioned, but it's not, like, directly political as if you would analyze, like, the politics as, like, parties or something. So, yeah. Who want to add?
I think if we come back to the question, who is dancing? I think Ukrainian Ukrainian civil society is very young right now, and in our community, which connected with underground scene, we all was born in independent country, independent Ukraine, and but you live in independent country большую часть жизни. Yeah.
Biggest part of your life, yeah.
Biggest part of your life, yeah. So our community started to be very activity, and we create this we create this social how to say it, we create this civil society, and we start to create it. We think about nature, we think about another people, we think about another people on the dance floor. We trying to create safe space, and I think it's all connected with political agenda, but all of our activity, it's a political agenda. And if you write a post on Facebook, it's political agenda too. So I think, yeah.
Maybe this brings us, to a more international level. Like if we have some kind of a lack of, experience or something, we can also, that's the reason we are also here. And probably I will address the next question to Lukas to tell about this issue of independence in already a completely different scene, which like a Berlin scene, and how is it? How can you stay? I don't know. This already brings the question of commercialization and I don't know mass tourism and so on. How can one stay independent and I don't know unnoticed by the capitalistic structure and so on? How can some kind of a community exist in such situations? So, yeah.
Probably it cannot exist unnoticed, but well, you have to take means to stay independent financially, first of all, to not be dependent on like third-party money, so to say. To do that, I think it's first of all it's a very tough job, and I think we don't entirely succeed with that at Cashmere. But we don't need private money. But still, we need we have a certain need for like public funding and stuff like that, which in Berlin is not too hard to get. So that's really what makes the space also possible for us. Is that there is a funding structure from the city and from the state we can at least in parts rely on and build up on. And on top of that, I guess like a certain skepticism towards other people's agendas and agencies they try to maybe imply on you. So I think that what we think makes us maybe a little bit more independent, of saying no, dare to say no, and not just like saying yes all the time for the sake of growing and being recognized. But this, I mean, to be self-aware about this is a very luxury situation we're in. First of all, because of the funding, and second, because of the place we're acting from, which is already being recognized from, because we are in the Berlin scene, I would say.
I guess I just had a comment to extend on that, is that like it's very easy, I think, to get maybe even flattered. Like, I don't know if this is taking a slightly different direction, but when someone is showing interest in whatever it is that you're doing, like namely corporate money of some sort. But yeah, I think it's really wise to keep like I agree with Lukas, a very skeptical view, or like really try and understand what is their agenda, why are these people suddenly interested in us. Is it just because it's, for example, Queer Month, that they're suddenly caring about our issues, or do they actually have invested interest in what we care about? And it kind of made me think about something that I think both of you mentioned in the very first talk, which was about misrepresentation on international media, which I can imagine must be so frustrating. And I hate Vice like super much. They're getting into anything that sounds somehow exotic to them, and it's like completely post-colonial, as you say. But I mean, I think in this regard, like maybe something that can even help that and help like also with staying independent can be to have some kind of like very strong, I don't know, manifesto or some kind of very strong image about what it is that you're about, so that there's like less room for misunderstanding. Of course, it's never going to eliminate it, because people come and they put their own agenda. I mean, we had a similar example recently where someone not even that far from our own community came to a party, not our party, another party of some friends, and they were kind of meant to report for a big magazine about this party, and didn't really engage at all, didn't really even talk with anyone. And so there can even be misrepresentation within like a similar community. Sorry, I managed to take that on a bit of a turn. Off topic. Sorry.
Also, maybe you guys have questions to each other. Okay, then actually I have also one question. I probably will again address it to Lukas, but I'm not sure if I should. Because you are teaching, I would like to ask you about the role of education in the whole process. I know of building the community, of the community growing. I know growing there intellectually also, and so on. Thanks.
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a precise answer to that, despite the very general proclamation of, teaching always helps, and it's good to.
Yeah, sure, but also it's because you have, you do have, I don't know, the space, the institution where you teach, and you can see how many students are going through what they are doing further and so on. So probably this is about it.
Yeah, maybe you can be a bit more precise on the questions.
If more precise, we do not actually have any institutions that deal with music, with the contemporary music for sure. We do have some old institutions, and they work only with the old stuff. So yeah.
Oh yeah, well, what we're trying to do at the university is, maybe in terms react on this new situation for working as a musician in like 2019. But in the first place, it's really about the role of an art school in developing your role as an artist and what you have to say and what you want to do. Maybe this bridges the gap from like traditional music school, where you're trained as a musician, as an interpreter of playing the piano according to a score by a composer who sets the notes. This is not what we're doing, so we take sound more from a artistic understanding, and take any bedroom producer serious as a composer and as an artist. So maybe that's the somewhat obvious shift, which gets partly reflected in our program at the art school. And I see this at other music schools. Maybe, there is a lack of that, acknowledging the changing role of a musician, maybe, because the industry changed also, and of course there's still the classical music where you can be interpreter, but yeah.
Lou, you also mentioned that you have you spent, in your community. There is also this question of an education, that you read a lot of books, making readings and so on. Maybe you can also respond on this question.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that education is highly important, and even within something that we've been kind of naming hedonistic as a rave, I think education is something that can definitely be injected into that environment. I would also disagree with the fact that rave in itself is hedonistic purely. Of course, it has hedonistic qualities, and it's a time that we can go to kind of forget about our outside realities. But hedonism, I think, has a kind of negative connotation, which maybe doesn't necessarily encapsulate all of what is rave. I think there's a lot of other aspects that we don't think about when we consider rave. It's not just the time that you spend on the dance floor, but it's also the time that you take in the bathroom, lining up, taking drugs together, at the bar, buying water, talking to your neighbor, talking to people you'd never talk to. There's a lot of kind of these small connections and community building, and even just interactions with other people that you'd never meet otherwise. And I think all of these have the potential for some sort of course not traditional education, but like a sharing of ideas and a way of strengthening your community, and also enforcing these no homophobic, no racist, no sexist kind of ideals, that we can kind of educate other ravers how to act within the rave. And I've definitely been in many rave spaces which are much bigger, and even in our collective, which I think like we have a capacity only for like 400, no, 300. I should know that, I'm the door person, but like, yeah, 300 maximum capacity. So it's like a super small party, but you do definitely get people who are coming into the party who don't necessarily fit within the guidelines. And when conflict occurs, it's also a question of like, okay, how do we deal with this person? Is it just like ejecting them? No, we don't want to play this role of authority and perpetuate the cycles that we're seeing in the outside world. We'd rather like talk with this person and say, okay, why was this behavior not appropriate? Try and resolve it with the aggrieved person. If they're in a really bad shape, you know, call them a taxi home or something like this and make sure they get home safe and tell them, yeah, you can come back next time, but please like work on these kind of behaviors. So I mean, I think there's something to be said, yeah, for like a kind of caring education approach. Yeah.
Thanks. You want to respond? Yeah, sure.
So I want to say that Sarah, which I meant, Sarah Thornton, she says that like the club culture is a culture of likes and dislikes and like a culture of taste, and that there is a connection between like taste and how to say, like cultural capital, and that like these communities that you just mentioned, absolutely, I totally agree that like and what I was talking about, it's not only the dance floor, I mean that all these small situations, and even like I spent in the line to the toilet even longer than on a dance floor ever, like always, I mean, so of course, and you talk to people and you make new connections, and sometimes you even continue to like sometimes you even have like make business connections, like being naked and sweaty in the toilet line is fine. But here I think that again I would say that like if you remember like Bourdieu, he told that despite of the political capital there is like more important things as cultural and social capital, and especially this cultural capital is created and formulated by the education, first of all. And to me, it is probably one of the possible prisms or approaches how we can analyze who is dancing, because like to me this cultural and social capital is much more important rather than everything else. And again, but I mean we are just going in circles because like all the culture and like social things there are like somehow incorporated in political, or like we can ask what went first, yeah, like chicken, or how do we call this small chicken? Hen or chicken? Okay. Yeah, what was like first, like culture or politics? Because like culture is everything that is created by people. At the same time, political is like everything which exists within the community. So, but yeah, like coming back to the idea that I wanted to share. So for me, like this cultural capital is what you've just mentioned. So this is what is about, what is standing behind the person, what this person has in his or her head, or like background or experience or something. And it's something much more bigger rather than like on the political dimension. Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about like which comes first, the culture or the politics, then aren't these small like kind of cultural actions also somehow then political, of course, because that's going to inform what type of a person you are, what type of person you vote for, and everything. So I'd be interested to know like what can kind of be opposed to these social actions, like.
Yeah, Yustyna?
Shortly, I will just also shortly add in relation to education, because I also have this kind of interpretation, or maybe I would even say speculation on this topic. I think that maybe partly in Kyiv, rave became so popular among youth after Maidan, because on Maidan the youth agenda wasn't properly represented too. Because we actually had a quite strong student movement long before Maidan, but then it somehow dissolved very quickly, and I think that right now this is something we are missing here a lot, because maybe because I even remember that during Maidan period we were trying to mobilize people for student strike, but we somehow didn't manage to do it, make it a real student protest. So I kind of have this idea that maybe this youth protest spirit, maybe it was somehow channeled into this rave, and this is how our young people found their way to protest. But of course, I think that universities are very important, first of all, because they teach us critical thinking, and I think that this kind of protest spirit is right now very lacking in our educational institutions as well.
Thank you, Yustyna. I think this is a good time to hear something from the audience, and I really would appreciate if someone would give their comments, their thoughts, or maybe their questions to the participants of the. Yeah, we have one already, but unfortunately we do not have a radio microphone. But we will hear you here.
Okay, thanks a lot for the speech and
Sorry, can you name yourself?
Oh,
also?
yeah.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. I have a question for Yustyna. Talking about right wing, you slipped into this strange, weird contradiction that I think is worth pointing out. You told that you think that let me put it like this. Don't you think that being judgmental to the person who's like a big muscled man wearing outdated symbols as their tattoos, but still acting peacefully, don't you think that being judgmental towards them is the attitude there, is the exact attitude that you are trying to distance yourself from?
Well, I don't think I'm being judgmental. I'm basically being triggered because unfortunately, I would be very happy if this symbol would be outdated, but it's not, because fascists do exist in our political reality, and they are quite strong. So this is, I would be happy if it was like this, but
Yeah,
I mean,
I may also add that those people who, with the muscles, wearing these tattoos and so on, they're not so actually peaceful already during the party. And me and my friends, and also they witness a different situation during different raves actually, where those guys are coming, and then you do not feel safe at the very end. So it's not a judgment, or prejudice. It's just the natural reaction to unpeaceful situation.
Oh, can I answer it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not. I agree with you completely, but I mean that saying that people are like wearing something, this kind of stuff, and like having some tattoos and stuff like this, but still, like you said that they are acting peacefully. They are acting peacefully, and you still, feel discomfort towards them. I mean, this is not really. We're not talking about commune. I'm actually commenting on the words of Yustyna. I'm not actually making it up. You know what I'm saying? So.
But to be exact, Yustyna said even if they act peacefully, because in one moment you can see a person and it acts peacefully, he's just passing you, but on the when you see the other situation, you understand this person is not. And if you see different situation, you have already some knowledge about those people. So for sure there might be some prejudice to the people who have a swastika. I do, for example, and I'm not shy about it.
So yeah, that's why I actually try to point out this prejudice that we have. So we agree with
Yeah, well, I agree for myself, probably.
And the very big problem is that I actually have experience of them acting absolutely not peacefully towards me. So, because VCRC, our institution, it suffered many attacks by far-right people. We lived through a neo-Nazi pogrom in our premises. Our director and colleague was very heavily beaten by a group of Nazis, when he had several bone fractures on his face. So this is it's super serious for me, and it's totally not about prejudice. I'm not even prejudiced. I just completely don't accept it. It's unacceptable for me.
This might be not about the, well, if you call prejudice the situation when you don't feel safe at the streets, actually, because your face might be already recognized and you have to look around you to feel safe, then I wouldn't call it actually a prejudice, This is about the experience and very bad experiences we witnessed, actually. Yeah, sure. Well, also I've been I witnessed such situation. I was in such situation even during the Schema, for example. So when the guy, a Nazi guy, came to me and said "What are you looking at me?" and he definitely was not peaceful. So, but also I saw such situation during the rave, the last raves, and they're becoming much more common, and this is actually the problem. If it would be just one moment or one situation that wasn't, there wouldn't be nothing to talk about here, But this already becoming a common situation, so that's why we are raising this question. But maybe other people have also some other questions on the topics we've discussed.
I just had 2 seconds I wanted to
sure.
to put in that there's also a couple of other things that come to my mind about this specific situation. One is that this guy chose to have his shirt off, revealing the tattoos, privileging his exposure and his comfort over the others of people around him. Surely he knows that showing swastikas are triggering to people. You might have a swastika tattoo, but maybe you're not going to be putting it in people's faces and trying to aggress them with that. And another thing that comes to mind is that maybe the subjectivity of someone appearing feminine is also maybe more even in danger than somebody who might, be less, be more able to take on this guy in a fight or something. But if somebody's personally triggered by it, I would never imagine that, I would also be triggered, for sure, to see some Nazi in the party. I would probably not be able to deal with it at all.
Yeah, thanks. I've seen the question or the comment. Please name yourself.
First of all, thank you for the quite big discussion you made. First of all, I will shortly present myself. My name is Matri. I'm a 21-year-old student which already graduated from the bachelor's degree from the Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, and I'm an active party goer since last year. I have been going to race for a year and a half, and for me it's also a very disgusting situation when I met a lot of people with swastikas and other far-right symbols on their bodies, and it's not like the local situation with only with Ukraine, where you see a lot of Nazi and far-right people on the raves. I think it's more global. It's more a global one problem, and a lot of. I think my thought of this is in fact that not only. I will say it in other way, because far-right groups now because I know a lot of people from far-right groups which are already changing their views when they went to a couple of raves. They became to think in other ways. Not, of course, I am not saying about a statement that they're fully changed their views from far right to like more peaceful ones, but they started to think another way. And of course, I think that it's still a big problem with the conflicts that emerged with Clother, with Jugendhub and other clubs, where with an information campaign that made far-right groups, a lot of attention from politics came out there, and there were a couple of raids from police to these clubs, which were very strictly connected to the far-right attention to these clubs. I know a lot of situations where like bans from far-right people when they know that large party is standing in one of the clubs, they're like waiting for the party goers when the party is over, and they like making a разбой.
Make a fight.
Yeah, make a fight with these people, and it is like pleasure for them, and this is a very sad situation. But I think that party producers and promoters have to make a strict position to these to their parties, and they must inform more complex this topic about tolerance, about like communication with people with other gender, with other race or other kind of stuff.
To take a responsibility.
Yeah, to take more responsibility of this.
Yeah.
Because I see that many major parties and also Sхема didn't label or didn't mention these topics very well.
Yeah, well, but actually, Sхема did made announcements, that you might be kicked out of the party because of racism, discrimination, and so on. This is already the point, Katya.
Yeah, but do these people really kick out?
Well, yeah. The question is if these people are really kicked out, but this is already probably different question. Maybe, yeah, yeah.
My name is Irina. I'm kind of like leading on to the same conversation, and my question is more of like what can be done to confront these people and to resolve this conflict? Because should it be the confrontation and like literally like kicking people out and not letting them near the parties and things like that, or is there any sense for having a conversation about it and trying to kind of like make them peaceful about it, like not giving a shit about ravers and just minding their own far-right business?
Well, it's a difficult question. I'm sure this is a difficult question for promoters how to avoid this situation, because I also understand, the attentions not to, let them speak for themselves.
Thank you. But no, if you want. No. Okay. Yeah. So I just want to comment as well. And terribly sorry, I forgot your name. Like what just Guy mentioned. Yeah. Okay. So like also like about the parties that we are throwing now, like we have very clear politics at the entrance, that policies at the entrance that you are not allowed to enter with any political statements on your clothes, even like football signs, like of any of a football club. And one guy was kicked out at one of the latest party because he made. I can't do it because camera is filming, but I don't know how to say it in English. Зигу кинуть. Yeah. But I just so yeah, we have like very clear instructions for the security at the entrance, how to act. And like last time there was a guy in Umbra t-shirt, and we told him that he's not allowed to come, and he like can I like wear it upside down? Yeah, and we allowed, so he entered. So I think that it's again, and let me come back to what was mentioned, and then I will summarize that. Actually, I think that situations in Kyiv and, for example, in Germany and in Berlin particularly are very, very different in terms of like swastika, tattoo people and stuff. Because here, I know a lot of people, like I have some friends from Berlin who are coming to Kyiv pretty often now, and when they see people with like swastikas and with SS tattoos, they approaching them and asking like, why do you have it? And pretty often people just say that, it's my mistake of use, I don't really like think it's cool now, but what can I do? Like it's too expensive to get rid of it or something, and it's on their neck, on face or stuff. So yeah, it's actually a reality. So I think, and it's like again, coming back to the subject that we discussed about the education, that I think that here we have to think what to do and how to manage and maybe how to approach it, I don't know, Ministry of Education and stuff. Because like, you know, they just don't know what is it about, and it's like just cool when you are at like I don't know, like 15 years old, you just start to go to the stadium, like to be a football fan, and it's like super connected to all these like movements, and you just think it's cool, and cool people around you, cool guys, they were in Fred Perry, like they look good and stuff, so you just copy it as an attribute, but you don't know in details what's standing behind of it. Of course, it's like their stupidity and it's their fault. Yeah, definitely.
It might end up with something much worse.
Or no. And I think that in most cases, no, yeah. And so here, I think that it's more about like education and cultural capital, what I've mentioned before. Yeah.
I think this is actually the time we should end up, and I again want to say thank you for everybody who took part in the discussion. To say thanks to the audience, and also I would like to thank to Metaculture and to Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany, and also Bosch Stiftung and Vasyk Stiftung, which supported our events and our residency also. And yeah, thanks again for coming.